Let's saunter into harmony territory once again. It's a rocket, the Budget Electric from the 1960s. If you wanted to be in a garage band and play Louie Louie between watching Gemini mission footage over Skippy peanut butter sandwiches and RC Cola, you needed one of these. You didn't see them on American Bandstand or Ed Sullivan all that often, but for 117 bucks, you could look real swell on stage at the Freshman Mixer. At some point, these things have attained nostalgic cool. The pickups are fetishized, of course, to the point where a lot of these have been cannibalized for the gold foils. The guitar was introduced in 1959. This example is from 1961. It's an H54. There were a number of different models with 1, 2, or 3 pickups. In 1963, they changed to a red sunburst. You've seen me work on a couple of those over the years. There was another model that even had a stop tailpiece with vibrato. Most of them had a standard trapeze tailpiece like this. Later in the 60s, they started making them with a double cutaway, like a Gibson ES335. This one predates the adjustable truss rod, which went in, I think, 1964, if memory serves. It has a steel reinforced neck. Sometimes that's not enough to keep the neck straight, though, unfortunately. This one has a non-functioning bridge pickup, I'm told. We'll have to test that. Don't you love these knobs? Little cupcake knobs? They're great. So, non-functioning bridge pickup. Oh, first thing I see that the jack is quite loose in there. Could be the pickup itself. Could be the connection to the pot. Could be the switch. Vital statistics. More than 6/64ths on the bass, 6/64ths on the treble. A little high. Checking the relief. Got a capo on at the first fret, holding down the low E on the body. Measuring in the middle of the neck. Somewhere around 18 thousandths. Much too high. I'll remove the pick guard. This is one of the models where I'll probably have to do everything through the F-hole. Put my little jack end on a string in there. And we'll start by looking at that, because it seems like the jack needs cleaning at the very least. It's a little dusty. The connections seem fine. We'll clean up the contact points. I'll have a look at the switch next. The plate is accessible from the top, but the switch itself, forget about it. Yeah, this is one of the ones where the switch itself is the same height and a little bit more than the depth of the body, which is crazy. I mean, I think Switchcraft made a shorter switch than this back in the day, but getting that in there is going to be a real fun job. At least these aren't the ridiculously small mini pots that are in some of the later versions. That's interesting. Got brass for the top here. Seems to be aluminum for the bottom ones, or steel. A lot of fuzz on these. Well, definitely I can see on the back of this cap evidence of a second wire being soldered to it, which I suspect is this springy ground shielding thing that they used. There seem to be remnants of copper wire too coming out of the ground from the hot lead. So that might be part of the problem. This thing has come ungrounded. Okay, checking out the volume pots. Got some interesting stuff going on here. First off, there's the date code. We've got 137, which is the manufacturer code for CTS, is the maker of the pot. 62 would be 1962. This is a 1962 guitar, it turns out. And then 25, which would be the 25th week. So this was made when, like, the end of June 1962. But the really weird thing to me is both of these pots. If you pick up any guitar and you look at the volume pot, odds are you're going to see that the first lug on that thing has been bent back and soldered directly to the case, grounding it. Because the way these things work, of course, is you're basically varying the amount of current running through it from wide open to zero. You're basically shunting a certain amount of that current off into the ground to get different volume settings. Is this the way this is supposed to be? And it's like that on both of them. Is this like a mistake at the factory? I'm going to go check some stuff online and see if I can find a wiring diagram that shows me this, or photos. All the pictures I saw seem to suggest that this should be connected to ground. So I'm going to make it look like the pictures online. I want good connection between the metal parts, not just relying on the solder to bridge them, but I want them together. Measuring outputs. The neck is around 11.5 k ohms. .5 for the bridge too. So these are fairly well matched, and they both seem to be functioning. Yeah, I think something might be going on with the switch. It was cutting out a second ago, and now it's not working at all. I'll spray a little cleaner on the contacts. Okay, once again, next side works. If I switch over to both, neither of them works, which tells me something is dead shorting. Okay, here's the wildest thing. If I've got the pickup selector in the middle for both pickups, I'm getting no bridge signal, but I am getting a neck signal. If I turn down the bridge volume, it also turns down the neck. It's weird, right? Shouldn't happen that way. Yeah, I got an email out to the customer there talking about the wiring situation. What I'd like to do is essentially make a new harness and rewire it just like a Gibson ES330 or a Les Paul 1950s style. The thing with the harmonies is they've got that weird volumes on top, tones on the bottom, which will confuse the heck out of you if you play any other guitar. So what I'd like to do is basically remake it in the Gibson image. Okay, had a talk with the owner, and we are going to make a fundamental change in the way this thing is organized. So, no longer beholden to the Harmony design. As far as I know, Harmony used a really unusual set of pot values. It had 1 meg for the volumes, 250k for the tone. 250, that seems normal, but 1 meg is a pretty high value, especially for a single coil pickup. They can be very, 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 very bright sounding, like annoyingly bright. Usually you put a 1 meg on if you've got a super dark sounding humbucker that you need to lighten up. I've always changed them up for 500k. I pair that with the 0.02 microfarad capacitor. I think they sound better. It was an odd choice. I think Fender used 1 meg pots on the Jaguar, but that's a very different pickup. You can see that one of these things is not like the others. I stole a page from the Harmony Company. The bridge volume is silver in color, everything else is brass. There we are. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. There's no string ground originally on these guitars. Up next, we'll give it a treat in the form of some heat. This is my neck heater. It's an aluminum square rectangle, hollow inside. A couple of resistance heaters adhered to this thing, wired up to my DC power supply. It gets up to about 170 degrees Fahrenheit, which is just about warm enough. And I will slowly increase the pressure. I've got some shims on either side here, which will basically force this thing into a back bow. I need to overbend it slightly during this process because there's a certain amount of spring back. That's not always predictable. This thing works, you know, it's like Sex Panther. 70% of the time it works all the time. It works great when it works. Some necks, for whatever reason, just don't want to comply. Put it that way. And let this go for about an hour, turn it off, let it cool down fully, and then we'll go on and give it a setup. Even though we're moving into June, there is some fret sprout. The ends are just a bit sharp here. Of course, we've got this black paint job over everything, which I don't really want to mess up too badly. So I'm going to go in there with a small file just on the edges, as opposed to taking a file and doing this, which would cause extensive damage. A lot of harmonies were sent out to stores with extremely high nut action. So high that after 30 years of hard playing, they're still high. Okay, we're pretty close to the end of travel for the bridge here. The action is, it's okay, but the main issue is the strings at that level are so low that they will bang into the top of the pickup if you fret it. Basically resting on the edge of the pickup. So, probably going to put a shim under the neck. After the heat treatment, the neck relief is now around 12 thousandths, which is better. It's not great, but it's okay. Screws come out. Shim goes in. Well there, gang, this is not a satisfying conclusion. There is something definitely amiss with the bridge pickup itself. I checked it out. The lead wire going into the case seems fine. There are no obvious cracks or kinks. I suppose it's possible at some point maybe some liquid got spilled on it or something, or maybe there's a breakdown going on in the coating of the windings in the coil. But you remember that the multimeter didn't indicate a short or an open circuit. It looked fine when I measured it, so, you know, I wouldn't have gone to the trouble of making the wire harness cost me a whole bunch of time and parts. It does function, but the output is very, very weak. And they're so unbalanced that it doesn't make sense to try. You know, you basically end up with a one pickup guitar. Demonstration. I've turned up the amp quite a ways. Something's coming off that pickup. If I switch over, I'm going to have howling feedback, so I'll have to turn down the amp. It's there, but it's like ghostly. And there's not much I can do at this stage because I don't have a pickup winder and it's not part of my thing. I can install another one of these pickups if one can be found. The ultimate irony is, of course, I happen to have one of this exact model pickup in the old parts bin. This one I know for certain is pooched. It's dead shorted out, non-functional. I suppose at some point I should get a pickup winder and get into that whole business, but I don't know. Sometimes the guitar wins. Of course, I managed to make it play really nicely. The action is just about perfect. Frets are feeling good. I mean, it feels nice, but man, bummer. Epilogue. I was editing this video, and I came to the part where I was testing the outputs on the pickups, and I realized that 11K ohms is way high for vintage gold foil, I think. I know they make modern ones that are a little hotter. So I looked at my multimeter, and the little battery icon is flashing. It was the last reading it took. Could that have anything to do with it? I don't know, but I pulled out my spare here, and wow, it's reading 2.3K ohms, which sort of matches what I'm hearing. It's about 1/3 the output of the neck. Nice to know, but still anticlimactic. Sorry about that. Let's have a listen.